So before we start getting into, I don't know, because I know that I have to say some unpalatable things during these videos, but I also know that I have to say them in a way that you will take them on board and understand the context that they're given in. Now, basically, the rule of law and the systems that uphold the rule of law and the understanding of institutional evolution and how it's been shaped by changing family structures and evolving power structures, that's never had the opportunity to synthesize at the LSE level. This has happened throughout institutions as a reflection of normal social change by increments. And what we're seeing particularly around the family courts and around women like me because austerity is not aware of these systems, is that I have to manage the rule of law. I have legal obligations, but I also have obligations placed on me by systems which are developed using belief systems which are which start in the LSE and were born in the LSE. So I need to talk to you about the tension between those belief systems, because the intersectionality and the systems analysis that I represent, you're going to now have to develop at an elite level, and that's a lot more difficult than you might imagine. In fact, I don't think it is a lot more difficult than you might imagine. I think you're beginning to realise. Now, what I want to say to you first of all is that crises are going to do most of the work for you, and it's going to be about your responses to crisis. Now, I said in the first video that you embody tensions. Now, this is the first thing you have to understand. The state trained me to do this. That's why I reflect. I reflect on power dynamics. I reflect on the tensions that I'm embodying. I know when to take responsibility. The LSE has not been involved in the evolution of these systems. The LSE was involved in these systems being born. The creation of the institutions of the welfare state and the development of local authorities, along with changing to family structures, has pushed the rule of law so that it has evolved. But there hasn't yet been a point of synthesis where the LSE would have been made sufficiently aware of it. Now, I was aware of it because I am used to watching how systems are working on the arse end, and the fact that because of this lack of awareness at your level, our child protection system was the first thing that ceased working, and then we attempted to roll back equality for women because welfare economics has no connection with the duties and this rule of law. And so this is a really horrible tension that I sit on, because I knew at this point I had to get to the LSE because you would be looking for a multidimensional understanding of inequality, because I knew that as you go through crisis, it will be crises that force you to develop it, and it will be looked after children who form the baseline of your new multidimensional understanding of the economy, because they are always policy failure. When you look at looked after children, you are looking at failure in society, you are looking at failure in their family structures, you are usually looking at policy failure, you are usually looking at young people who have been harmed by institutions, even well-intentioned institutions. And what this is going to mean is that you now have to develop a function that not only understands how these institutions evolve, how the rule of law evolves, how power dynamics have shaped institutional functioning. You are also going to have to develop the ability to see the difference between the way policy is intended and the way that policy is experienced. And you are going to have to learn about the impact of different institutional structures. And this is not going to come because you're going to sit 6 clever people in a room. This is going to come because we just undermined the rule of law for 8 years around these systems. And it's this institutional failure now that, if you can use it properly, will give you a bunch of information that you need. Now, whatever had happened, whatever the belief systems that had emerged in the 20th century, this would have happened. I would still have been sat here talking to you at this point saying the same thing. I am merely a function who learns to reflect on policy failure. So whatever the policy failure is, I'm going to reflect on it. So my perspective is shaped by that. These responsibilities in the care economy and to look after children cannot be abdicated. They are a constant threat through our political economy that you have to pay a great deal of attention to, because they tell you a lot of things. And at times like this, when we are reaching the point where the context has changed around systems, we have to really revise our understanding of the belief systems that we're using to shape our institutions. We have to really think about our future now that we have just launched ourselves over a cliff with Brexit. We have eroded systematically these institutions over a great many years, and that institutional breakdown is what's going to bring this learning to you. So I wanted you to understand, though, that that crisis will come to you and will present to you as threats to your identity. Now, the person I wanted to use to demonstrate this is Frank Howell, and I thought about this a lot, because if I had to rank the people that I've met in the last 10 years in the order of decency, Frank Howell would probably be solid top 3 most of the time. I've thought more bad thoughts in the last hour than Frank Howell's thought in his entire life. And he's a very clever man with a great deal of integrity who spent his life trying to do something good. And for the benefit of any other viewers, and there won't be any other viewers because this is quite niche stuff, Frank Howell was the economist who taught me about how we have been measuring inequality. Now, when I got the reading for this lecture, I was stunned at what we had been doing. And we have created a mirror whereby economists deflect blame and their own feelings of shame. We've created a maladaptive shame mechanism in economics so that policy failure can reliably be blamed on people like me. And when I was in that lecture, I got the reading for the lecture, I knew what I'd found, I knew what it was. I was actually quite physically shocked by it, because it was like a smoking gun. And I didn't do any reading for the rest of my lectures. At the LSE, to attend a lecture, you need to have read the 3 essential readings and probably half of the recommended additional readings. So you go to lectures equipped. I didn't do that week for any other lecture but this one. My maths wasn't great because I was doing postgraduate statistics without ever having done A-level maths. So all I had was, if you've got a model where you put in GDP and the symbolism of the lone parent and public opinions and you mix it all up, you're going to get the same shit each time. And I had gone to this lecture ready for war. And then this man turned up. Now, I don't trust people who can make everybody in a room feel special and listen to, because those people are usually psychopaths. But this is not what Frank Howell is. Frank Howell is a very decent human being, and he's very, very interested in every person in that room. This is a man who has spent his life trying to do something really good. And then I sat in that lecture, and he was injured by me even broaching these things. Because Frank Howell has been working with a consensus, a reliable consensus, for a long time and trying to make the best of it. And the problem is that once that consensus shifts, people start looking for scalps and absolution because nobody wants to say that it's a consensus. And what they will start looking for is the institutions who upheld, things that they deemed to be harmful that actually everybody agreed were alright. Everybody agreed that single parents should get paggered with austerity. And then when the backlash comes, everybody wants scalps and absolution to know why we agreed this. Well, we did this because there was consensus. And Frank Howell has been working with the consensus. But what you're now going to go through is a process where the belief system that I know, John, is the core of your life's work, and the same for Frank Howell, is about to kind of disappear into thin air, and you're all going to be just looking and going, well, does this mean that these men were wrong? No, it doesn't. It means that we needed a belief system for a period of stability that would manage a consensus. And we now need to move rapidly to look at how the context has changed around that consensus, and we need to make an adjustment. But within that adjustment, we have to make a major break. And one of them is going to be that you have to recognise now, because of looked after children at elite level, you have to reflect on identity. And this is going to be awful, because this is the core of intersectionality. And what intersectionality is, it's about reflecting on your identity and the power that you have. And it's about understanding, before you can do any good, that you have to recognise you're doing harm. So we recognise we've looked after children at all points that state intervention is harmful. We recognise that the state makes mistakes. We recognise that systems break down, and we learn. And during this period where everybody's looking for scalps and absolution about the state of our social care system and our welfare system and wanting to know why nobody knows how this works, they won't want to admit that the reason nobody knows how it works is because there was public consensus that we could just do this. They'll just kind of come for you and go, well, why don't you know? This is happening in the context of Brexit. It's very likely that, the LSE are going to have a really tricky time. But what I wanted you to know was that with intersectionality comes with that ability to reflect on identity, with intersectionality comes a systems analysis. And if you can get through that crisis, and if you cannot during those crises react to protect identity, And if you can say, yes, the belief system that I have made my life's work, and that Frank Cowell believed, worked in his entire life, we didn't do that for bad reasons, but I have to not protect that belief system now because I have to be a controlled demolition for that belief system. But what you have a responsibility to do is you have a responsibility to men like Frank Cowell. So it's all right for little mini wannabe revolutionaries to go, oh, we want everything smashed. This country needs you to retain what you are. We need you to be the London School of Economics and Political Science, but you have to go through a process where the economics and political science that have shaped the latter half of the 20th century is going to collapse. And it's actually through understanding this intersectional understanding of these systems that I'm talking about that you should find the seeds of new growth. And it's actually paying attention. It's not actually trying to reinvent the wheel, but looking at these systems and understanding that you as an institution have to face up to the tension between your functioning and your identity. We need rich people to keep sending their children to the LSE to be educated. We need that to keep happening. That's only going to happen if you're at the forefront of economics. And what you're going to be pushed to do during this crisis is to develop, instead of being involved in the search for scalps and absolution, you're going to be given crises which are going to allow you and push you to reflect on the tension between your function and identity, that an institution of class reproduction cannot automatically be doing what's good for the poor because they have no way to do so. You are going to be forced to recognise the coercive impact of institutions, and you are going to be forced to recognise that you do not currently have the ability to see the evolving rule of law. That's going to come through crisis, with lots of people screaming for scalps and absolution, but what you need to be doing is developing systems which learn from crisis. And if you can do that, if you can develop systems which learn from crisis through this process, within that you will develop a function at the LSE so that you understand how systems work. And so that you are not just functioning for a belief system in periods of stability, but that you can also, as a university, go from a period of stability through a process of crisis and then back through another period of stability, and that within that process you can develop systems which learn from crisis. And that's the process that you're about to go through. So I don't know how much sense this made. My next video is going to be about crisis.